Hello again. Welcome to another episode of Leading from Alignment with our good friend John Opalewski. How are you, John?
Hey Jim, I'm doing well. It's so good to be with you today. I'm glad we had a chance to catch up. You've been a little bit of
Yeah.
a traveler lately, and it's just nice to
Yeah,
reconnect.
it's been good. I had my 34th wedding anniversary, and my wife and I ran away from home and left everybody behind. It was wonderful. It was wonderful tramping the United States. Yeah. So, hey, it's funny today in Pod 176, the topic. I know where we're heading, but it's funny because I think of you as one of the most level-headed leaders, one of the most level-headed people I know, and yet today you're going to talk to us about anger. Why don't you introduce that topic to us?
Sure, Jim, we're in the middle of a series of episodes on mental and emotional well-being.
Yeah,
And in episodes 174 and 175, we unpacked how to obey the third part of the greatest commandment, love
yeah,
yourself. And we talked
yeah,
about how becoming our own best friend is really foundational to long-term wellness. And there are many therapists and researchers who believe that one of the major culprits in a lack of well-being is the mishandling of anger.
yeah.
So that's why we're talking about it today in episode 176. And we're going to actually devote episode 177 to the same subject because there's so much to talk about.
Yeah,
I don't think we can cram it all into one episode.
right
Um,
on.
so, Jim, one thing many people don't know about anger is that it doesn't magically dissipate on its own. It has this
Huh.
uncanny capacity to keep percolating, often
Yeah,
beneath the surface. And if we don't intentionally tell anger where to go, it will take us to places we don't want to go.
yes,
As an example, if we don't tell our anger where to go, it will manifest as a knot in our gut every time we see the person we're angry with.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
if we don't tell it where to go, it will take us to a place, it can take us to a place of deep sadness and
yeah,
even depression.
yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
and I think if we don't tell it where to go, it will take us to a place of fractured relationships.
Yeah,
So, Jim, give me some initial thoughts on that. And I'd like us today maybe to look at some fundamentals of anger and then some places to tell it not where to go. How about that?
right.
And the
Yeah. Well, I guess my initial thought is, we're talking to Josh Spurlock not long ago, and we're talking
Mm,
about the major crises. Is that the thing that's knocking people out of ministry? And he said, no, it's the death by a thousand cuts. It's the
yes.
unresolved issues, and anger being one of those. Again, I think we've all experienced where we're in a church setting, or maybe we're the ones speaking, and you realize this guy's just beating one old goat. He's not feeding the sheep. He's mad about something, and that person's in this room right now, and I think he's mad at me, and it's had nothing to do with me. So
Yeah.
I think that like you're saying, what is the right place to put anger? I can name 100 bad places to put it. So I'm looking
Right.
forward to hearing the rest of what you have to say about this.
Yeah. I don't think it's lost on any leader that anger is, the opportunities for anger are abundant when
Mm,
you're leading an organization, when you're
yeah,
leading people.
people.
Um,
Yeah, the
yes.
organization's fine. It's the people.
So
uh,
let's take a look. And I think what I want to do is look at five fundamentals of anger, Jim, and
yeah,
and we'll talk about one. I'll mention something, and I'd just love you to comment on each one with me.
yeah, sure.
So here we go. Here's the first one. Anger is a human emotion.
Yeah,
It happens when someone violates you or takes something from you or crosses a healthy boundary that
yeah,
you've tried to set. And in those situations, anger is nothing more than being human.
yeah,
So, what do you think about that first one?
yeah. I don't think you're ever going to meet a human who doesn't understand in their own way what anger is. It's a very human emotion, but we have to be very careful. It's just human. Like, no, there are a lot of things that are just human that are poisonous and
Yes.
detrimental to relationships and organizations. So I think it's absolutely true that yes, it is human, but that doesn't excuse our humanity. that gives us a problem to solve. Our humanity is often a problem to solve, not something just relax in.
Yeah. And I think where we start to get into that territory is when we allow our anger to propel us to say something we shouldn't say, do something we
Yeah,
shouldn't do, hold
yeah,
back from the people we love, part of our heart because it's been
yeah,
hurt. That's where we start getting into the the negative territory. I almost think anger
yeah,
in a way is somewhat neutral. It's what we do
yeah,
with the anger, and we'll talk
yeah,
about that in just a minute. Well, actually, let's talk about it. Ephesians 4:26.
yeah,
The Apostle
yeah.
Paul says,
In
"In
your
your
anger.
anger, do not sin."
Yeah.
Um, I found that when I'm angry, it's easier to sin.
Yeah.
So, so
Yes.
I don't know that the anger, the emotion itself, is necessarily an issue. It's how we deal with it, and so it's a human
Yeah.
emotion. Secondly, anger is a secondary emotion.
Yeah. Huge.
Yeah, Greg Smalley writes this. He says, anger is usually a response to something else,
Yes.
an unmet need, a fear, um, perhaps a dashed hope,
Yep.
or we feel like somebody has control over us and we feel out of
Right.
control.
Yeah.
It's often a secondary emotion. Jim, what do you think about that second anger
Yeah.
fundamental?
It's funny. I used to be a military police officer. So the thought is it's unconscious thought, but if I'm not in control, then I'm in danger. So
Mm,
somebody's drunk, somebody's mouthing off, somebody's not obeying an order that I'm giving them. What's next is not that peaceful. Well, let's talk about this. I'm out of control. So what's my next tool? I'm angry. I'm forceful. I go all peacock. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
you better. And if you don't, I'm gonna, up against the wall. And you rough them up. And what is that? Well, you're scaring me. And so I'm going to use anger to regain control because I
yeah,
feel like I've lost it. I have to be more powerful than you. And anger is a very powerful thing.
it is.
So and so is peace, and so is love, and but when you're arresting a drunk, peace and love doesn't get you very far. And someone's trying to tear your head off. As a military police officer, you do everything that all the other police officers do, except everybody you arrest is a trained killer. So it's a little bit different than being a civilian cop. So if you didn't gain control of the situation, you were in real danger. And that worked okay, I guess, as a cop, but it didn't work well in my marriage, and it didn't work well raising sons, and it doesn't
Yes,
work well as a leader in a local church.
that's
So
right.
yeah, I totally get this. It's a convenient tool to manipulate circumstances the way you want them to be. But like you're saying, it's secondary. I was jealous, so I became angry. I was scared, so I became angry.
Right.
I'm powerless. I'm trying to be powerful. Anger is just the most convenient club to reach for in those circumstances, and it's not the purpose of it.
And so when you as a leader are experiencing a high level of irritability
Yeah,
and you're overreacting to scenarios, good question, I think a good prayer to pray is, Lord, what's behind that?
yeah, it is. Yes,
Can
yeah,
you help me with that, Lord? Would you show me
yeah.
what am I really upset about?
Right, right.
And I don't think you have to pause for very long. And
Yeah,
and God will point that out pretty quickly to you.
yeah,
And so understanding that there's something probably that's fueling this
yeah,
reaction. And if I can deal with the source,
yeah,
I'm in better shape. And we'll talk about that more in the next episode. Here's the third thing
yeah.
about anger. And I think you kind of alluded to it, Jim, that sometimes anger is the right emotion.
Sometimes.
When a friend that you love and trust betrays you,
Yeah,
I mean, if you're not angry about that, I don't know if you're in touch with your humanity.
yeah, yeah,
Um, I think anger is appropriate when somebody verbally abuses you or puts their hands on you in an unwelcome manner.
yeah.
Uh, I think anger is an appropriate response when you see injustice inflicted
Yes.
on others. Um, Sometimes it's the right emotion. Jesus got
Yeah.
angry,
Right.
uh,
Yeah.
and he never sinned. So I guess
Yeah.
it's possible, right? To be able
Yes.
to experience the emotion in a full way and yet not do something you have to get on your knees and confess.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. 'Cause God gets angry, but God's not an angry God, right? And
Correct.
so we can get angry without being angry people.
There you
There
go.
there is a moment, and Jesus grabs these cords and forms a whip and drives people out. There's not a big smile on his face.
Right.
There's something on his face that made everybody when he tips over the tables and everybody's coins go flying. They're not picking up their coins; they're running from somebody with a whip in his hand. He said, "This is a house of prayer. You made it a den of thieves." It's a righteous indignation. I think is probably
There you go.
the old fashioned term for that. There's a
Yes.
you hear what's happening in sex trafficking. You're like, well, that's just humanity. Well, what's wrong with
No.
you? That should outrage a sane person. But that anger tells me there's a problem. It doesn't create a solution though. And that's where if anger is my solution, I'm at the wrong place.
Right.
There's a teaching moment in anger. There's a pain relieved in anger. There's a justice that is righted through righteous anger. And that's the purpose of it.
And I think that anger actually produces energy
Yeah. Yes,
to
it does.
bring positive change,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I
Yes.
think we could reach back in our own history. We can see examples in the history of our country where
Yeah.
righteous anger was channeled
Yeah.
for positive change.
Yep.
And so sometimes it is the right emotion. The fourth fundamental is that anger is a revealing emotion.
Yeah.
Again, we alluded to it when we said secondary, but it really does call attention to root issues we need to address.
Yes.
When I was an 11-year-old, um, you know, I really never wanted to do gardening as an 11-year-old. I wanted to hang out with my friends and ring doorbells and run away. But my dad got me up early one morning and he told me my assignment for the day, this was summer. He said, John, you're weeding the flower garden today. And my dad was a perfectionist, so I know what that meant. I mean,
Mm.
that thing had to look pristine. And so I wasn't really excited about that, but I got into the garage. I grabbed the weeding uh, tools, and I noticed in the garage there were 8 50-pound bags of peat moss, and I had
Okay.
this brilliant idea. I'll just First of all, I don't know how I got a 50-pound bag of peat moss anywhere as an 11-year-old. I don't know how that
Yeah.
worked, but somehow or another I did it. And I opened up 400 pounds of peat moss and threw it on top of the weeds. There was like a
Yeah.
5-inch layer of peat moss that covered, and man, the garden looked amazing. And my dad came home at the end of the day and said, "Man, that looks awesome. Great job." And a week later, he realized what I had done.
Right.
And
You fed the weeds.
I was feeding the weeds, and they started to
Yeah.
emerge through that thick layer of peat moss. And my
Yeah.
dad he was not happy about that. I think sometimes as leaders, when we get angry, instead of dealing with it, we just try to cover it up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe we go into denial. Uh, Maybe we miss the God. I think anger is a God-given signal that something in our life needs attention.
Yes. Yeah.
And so it's a revealing emotion. And we want to encourage you, if you're listening or watching, stop throwing dirt over your anger
Mm.
in an unwise attempt to cover it up. Let
Yeah.
God show you the root so you can deal with it and get healthier. Jim, what do you think about that fourth one?
Yeah. My mom was in the mental health field. She started as a mental health patient, worked her way through degrees, and then she actually ended up leading mental health hospitals. So when she talks to me about mental health, I listen because she's an expert and she's mentally healthy. And she said to me one time, "There's no such thing as an unexpressed emotion." And
Mm,
like back to the weeds, sooner or later, things that are not resolved will be revealed. Sooner or
yeah,
later, if there isn't some satisfying conclusion to whatever I'm going through, then it will find it often at the worst moment, at the worst way that causes the most damage. The things I've been thinking and stewing on will suddenly come out of my mouth and devastate the people that I love.
Yeah.
I'll kick a dog. I'll punch a wall. I'll do some violent. A peaceful person does something violent. What's happened is they've been adding ingredients to a boiling stew, and eventually that thing
Right.
blows up. And God help the people that are around you when it happens. So yeah, it is vital to, again, like you're saying, what am I so angry about? What is it I'm believing that isn't true? What are the issues behind this? Why is this one thing connecting to other things? And when did I first feel anger or hurt or fear about this? And going back to that moment with Jesus and saying, God, would you forgive me? Would you help me? Would you heal me? And then come back forward through time and now face what's really happening, which is
Right.
the one thing, not the thousand unresolved things. It's
Yeah.
that last straw that breaks the camel's back. So what's actually on the camel's back and how do we get it off of the camel's back is an extraordinarily mentally healthy and important act.
Right. And so anger, it's a human emotion, it's a
Yep.
secondary emotion.
Yep.
Sometimes it's the right emotion, it's a revealing emotion. And
Yep.
lastly, Jim, anger can be a devastating emotion.
Yeah.
Unmanaged and unprocessed anger is a key contributor to major depression.
Yeah.
If you listen to the podcast at all, you know the story of my suicidal depression 30 plus years ago. Um, I was pastoring a growing church, married to a beautiful woman, still married to that same beautiful woman, thank the Lord. Four amazing boys, lived in a house with a pool. And yet I had this idea, Jim, that first of all, it was wrong for me to feel angry. And it was, as a pastor, it was even more wrong to ever express it.
Right. Hmm.
And that contributed to the darkest journey of my life.
Yeah.
You see, if you don't tell anger where to go, Jim, it takes you to places
Yeah.
you don't want to go.
Yeah.
And so, what I'd like
Hmm.
to do as we wrap up here, real quick, Jim, is to look at some places not to tell our anger where to go. And then,
Okay.
I'll kind of just run through those and then ask you to wrap us up. And then in 177,
Right.
we'll pick the subject back up and we'll specifically talk about two places where our anger can go that's really healthy for us.
Awesome.
Okay, so here's the places we don't want to tell anger to go. First, to eating chocolate.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, I'm not saying that that isn't fun or delicious. It just isn't helpful.
Right.
Uh, let's not tell our anger to go to social media.
Oh, please say that again. Yes. Yeah.
I,
Where
yeah,
where
let's.
angry people find each other. Yeah, and get more angry. Yeah.
I believe the purpose of social media is to inspire and uplift
Yeah.
instead of venting.
Yeah.
And we use it that way. Everything that we post is intended to inspire and uplift. We don't
Yeah.
vent uh, on social media. Here's the third place not to tell your anger where to go, and that is inside,
Yeah.
internal. I like to use the term caving into our anger.
Yeah.
Um, Caving in looks like this. I'll give you an example. Well, I'm angry because anger was modeled to me as a child.
Yeah.
And besides, I'm Italian.
Yeah.
It's genetic. I'm 50% Italian, so I can say that, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
you know, that response to anger is kind of just tossing our hands up in despair and
Yeah.
giving way to our rage. And I believe this is true, even if we grew up in an emotionally dysfunctional home or a volatile home, that God can change those dysfunctional patterns if we cooperate with Him.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
can get to the root of that. And I know so many people who told me before they knew Jesus, they were so deeply angry. And I'm shocked.
Yeah. because it's gone. Yeah.
It's gone. I may have
Yeah.
seen in a course of 30 years, I may have seen them be angry once.
Right.
And so, yeah, caving in. Here's the fourth place we don't want to tell our anger to go, and that's to blaming.
Yeah. Yeah.
Blaming goes something like this. I wouldn't act this way if you would just behave better.
Right.
In other words, you're the reason I'm angry.
Yeah.
Here's the problem with that. First of all, deep down, that's not true. And
Yeah.
secondly, we give people so much power over our happiness when we believe that's true. And
Yeah.
when we tell our anger to go to blaming, what we're essentially doing is I can only be happy in life if you act a certain way.
Right.
Um, Let me give you one more place to tell anger where not to go. And then, Jim, I'd like you to wrap this up.
Okay.
And that is to submerging. And I guess I
Mm.
alluded to it a little earlier. This response involves shoving our anger underground. And I was the king of
Mm.
submerged anger as a young leader.
Yeah.
Um, but here's what happens with submerged anger: it leads to bitterness,
Yeah.
the nursing of grudges, a very hard time granting forgiveness, and eventually struggles with anxiety and or depression. So,
Yeah.
Jim, that's what I have today for episode 176.
Yeah. Yeah. Just going off of the previous episode where the third part of the great commandment, loving yourself. This is part of loving yourself, isn't it?
I think so.
This is eating salad and going for a walk on a sunny day. This is an important part of an ongoing maintenance of your emotional, spiritual,
100%.
mental leadership health. And if you don't do an assessment every once in a while, not just before communion once a month, but before you walk into that gathering with people, before you come home at the end of the day, before while you're reading scriptures in the morning, really, really taking a good close look at the condition of your soul. Search me, God, and know my heart. Know those things that are inside of me that don't look like you. I like that thought where you say, well, I'm just that way. That's my culture. That's the way I was brought up. It's like it doesn't matter what your culture or how you're brought up. You're not supposed to be like you. You're supposed to be like Jesus, who had anger under control, was tempted in every way we're tempted, yet never, got upset and, destroyed Nineveh accidentally because he had a bad day, that kind of stuff. There's a beauty to this that we can walk in. So, John, thank you for this. This is important. And that coming back again, mental health, Converge. I think if there's something that Converge does better than anything else that Converge does, it's that emotionally healthy leader is what Converge is really good at helping create. So people say, John, I'm an angry person, and not because I'm Italian. I'm just an angry person. My wife says it. My kids say it. My coworkers say it. What do I do? How would they spend some time with you, maybe starting to get to the roots of those things, or
Yeah.
somebody else?
Yeah. Well, the best way to reach out to our team is through the website, convergecoach.com. Click the contact us link and fill out a form. Jim, we have a stable of coaches
We do. Yeah.
and mentors
Yeah.
who can address this issue of mental and emotional well-being. And we'll give you 30 minutes just
Yeah.
for free, no obligation, just to kind of see where you are. And perhaps 30 minutes will be adequate. Or you might decide, no, I'd like to work with you, with your
Yeah.
team. And we'd be just honored to journey alongside you.
Yeah. And I think because anger is so obvious, it may be one of the easier things to deal with.
That's a good point.
Because I know when I'm angry. I don't know when I'm burned out. There's no feeling, but I know when I'm angry. I know when I'm happy. I know when I'm sad. And that helps really guide the quest to find out what the roots of this are. So watchers, listeners, hear us. We want you to be an effective leader. And we all know 30 seconds of anger can undo 30 weeks of progress.
Wow. So true.
This is something we have to deal with. And so don't put it under the rug. Don't wait for another day. We're here to help. And if we can't help you, it's just too deep of a problem. We know lots of people that are really good at untying the knots and the rope of the human soul. So God bless you. We're cheering from you. May you have a week of peace, live long and prosper, and keep going as you continue to lead from alignment.